Welcome to the Encore Audio Archives YouTube channel. I'm Taper Dave, and this is my channel. I've uploaded hundreds of talks here that I've recorded at meetings in West LA, and I've also recorded conventions starting in 2013. I've got a bunch of those up. And Walt and Mary Murray, the original owners of Encore Audio Archives, started the company in the 80s, and Walt recorded Joe and Charlie's and a bunch of stuff down in Vista, California. My sobriety date is June 20th of 1994. I hope you find something you like, so please like and subscribe to my channel and comment down below. If you want to hear something that I don't have or that you don't see, I'll see that I get it. Anyways, take care and have a great day if you want to.
Now it is time to introduce our main speaker for tonight, Tom.
Hi, I'm Tom, alcoholic. And thank you, Joey, for asking me to come share here at Rodeo. And welcome if you're new. I saw there were a lot of newcomers and a lot of people from out of town. You've landed in a great place. If you have a desire to stop drinking, you're in the right place at the right time. And it really, really warms my heart to be at this particular meeting, even though I've not been to this room. The very first meeting I ever went to was the Rodeo meeting when it was on Rodeo Drive. And I was so scared, you know, and I didn't know what to make of it. I really appreciated the first speaker, Dawn, talking about being desperate, because I was so desperate. I knew one thing for sure. I knew that I didn't want what I had. I knew that my life was burnt down to the ground. You know, my best decision-making today got me here on time. Do you know what I mean? I made a plan. You have a very good secretary who reminded me that I was supposed to come tonight. And I got in the car on time from Silver Lake, and I pulled up on time, and here I am. That kind of stuff wasn't happening when I came in. Instead, what was happening, you know, on a Friday night, I was still really recovering from like the last weekend, I was always on some status of being on a run. Do you know what I mean? The days all blurred together. I would come out of blackouts on whatever day. I remember calling, you know, picking up the phone and asking the operator for the day, what day is it? Do you know what I mean? Like, because I need to know, and I'm too embarrassed to ask somebody that knows me. I'm a person who believes very strongly about this thing that we call alcoholism. We call it a disease, but I believe very strongly that for me, it's something that I was born with, predestined for, whatever it was. You know, I think I needed and wanted a drink way before I ever had a drink. I mean, my first drink was at 15, but I want to tell you, if you had seen me when I was 5 years old, you'd have known that I needed a drink badly, that I needed something to calm down. I was like, they talk about restless, irritable, and discontented, but for me, I could have added, you know, spazzy and angry and fearful. Do you know what I mean? I was just always fidgeting. I couldn't get right, and I grew up in the suburbs in Garden Grove. You know, a town that really never quite lived up to its name. No, not a pretty place, but no, I shouldn't say that, but I had sort of like a traumatic reaction to a very ordinary childhood. Do you know what I mean? There wasn't a lot going on there, but I retreated. I was so scared. From my earliest, when I was really little, I hid in the dryer. Do you know what I mean? Like this, you know something's wrong with the kid that's hiding in the dryer, you know? And then when I discovered, you know, my best day in my house growing up was behind a locked door with a jar of Betty Crocker frosting and a spoon. Do you know what I mean? Like then I was okay. If I was just by myself, because there was too much pressure to be around other people in my family and interact with them. I needed to feel, I couldn't escape the trauma of those feelings. And so it was really hard to be in my house. And it was twice as hard to be out of my house. You know, so this was my dilemma. I could not be happy or good or okay wherever I was. I was a kid who didn't fit in with the other kids. I think that, I mean, other people figured it out way before I did, but other people, we didn't have a word for it then, but, they knew I was gay way before I knew I was gay. And they would say things like, Thomas, don't walk like that. And I was like, and then to take a kid who's like so insecure, and like when you think about it, I was like, what do they mean? Like I'm trying my best, but I'm trying to watch, like, how do the other guys doing it? Like it's a lot of work to try to not swing my hands. It really was. And it was a lot of pressure, like 24/7 thinking about how to not look like they're telling me I'm not supposed to look. And then, speech therapy came along. They wanted me to not talk like that. They were like trying to get the gay off at an early age, as soon as possible. And it didn't work. I just remember the looks on their faces like, what are we gonna do with this child, And my whole family was very, very big into football. Like my dad was such a big, and my grandfather, so big into football. UCLA, they could own every game, every, like, what do you call the program? They'd staple the ticket on the corner and then line them up and talk about the stats and the players and John Wooden and all this stuff over and over. And I was like wanting their approval. Do you know what I mean? I wanted to fit in. Didn't care for the game much. So I remember I liked to sew. I didn't like to play football, but, I was just like sitting there sewing. And so I thought, I'm gonna make a pillow for Grandpa. And I made with a big football on it, because I wanted him to be, happy. And I just remember the relatives like standing in like a semicircle thinking, whose fault is this? And knowing that something was dreadfully wrong, but knowing I couldn't fix it, and this doesn't have to do with, my reaction to that was just supersized, you know what I mean? I just felt like you can be gay and not be an alcoholic. That's not my point with that. My point is that I felt like I couldn't deal with my differences. I felt like I couldn't be me and not drink. I couldn't be whomever I was. And at school, I couldn't be around the other kids. I remember at my very earliest second grade, third grade, like ditching recess. Like who ditches recess? Do you know what I mean? That's the creepy kid who can't deal with being himself. And I remember the tetherball going around that spinning post, and anyway. We knew there was not gonna, I was not like the success story that like, wow, he's gonna make something of himself one day. And I knew, this is what I knew. I knew I wanted to hide and be invisible, and I did that by hiding under this couch. That we had this like convertible sofa that I could orient myself in such a way to actually get in it and close myself in it and then never be found. It was weird. And there was this sort of folkloric story in my family about, am I talking like way too loud? No, okay. There was this story in my family about like Grandpa Bert. Grandpa Bert, my great-grandmother moved to Hollywood and whatever that was in the late 30s. And she left, or her husband had left her, Grandpa Bert left. And the story was that one night, Grandpa Bert said, Nana, I don't think he called her Nana, but we always called her Nana. But he said, I'm gonna go out to get a package of cigarettes. And he never came back. And I always thought, and this was like, this story was told over and over and over, and I always thought, lucky guy, he got away from this horrible family. How did he do it? And then it just planted this seed in my mind, like, just one day, if you plan it right, you can just walk away from these people, and somehow or another, you'll disappear. I don't know what I was thinking, but I really admired Bert for walking away and abandoning the family. And that was me as a setup for a 15-year-old kid who drank. I didn't ever have a social drink. I didn't drink at cocktail parties. I didn't ever have sidle up to a bar and have some. I never knew what to order once I finally even turned 21. I mean, I loved drinking straight from the bottle, and I started with as much creamed menthe as I could get down my throat and into face down in the dirt, and that's what I wanted to be, just out of it. And then my drink of choice became vodka, because I just thought it was so easy to do it, and it was I never wanted to, who wanted to bother with ice, do you know what I mean, or a glass, when you had the bottle already. It was just so quick, and then when I turned 16, of course I was living in Garden Grove, but that was my life changed. It was everything before that was that, and then everything after that was something else, because I could somehow or another, I got a fake ID, and it was 1976, and I bought a blazer. And a blazer, I swear, I think I looked 13 when I was 16, but with a blazer in Garden Grove, they thought you were 21 or at least, right? So I could buy booze with my fake ID, and I would just carry it in the car. And I was just off and running. I loved driving drunk. I loved drinking and driving. I loved everything about, I went right from Garden Grove to, Hollywood. I just went straight door to door. There was no stopping. Do you know what I mean? It was I wanted to go. It was a place where, one day, well, I have to say there was a roadblock on the way. There was first of all, in Long Beach, there was this weird, this isn't a gay meeting, but I'm going to just say this one last thing and then I'll stop it, okay? But there was this parking lot in Long Beach where all this cruising, they call it, was going on. And I thought, what is going on here? These guys are all driving around and looking at me. It's disgusting. It's appalling. I can't believe, and then they're getting in each other's cars. What are they doing? And the next night I came back with hot pants and a tank top. And then I was there, do you know what I mean? And I was one of those kids, a teenager who just loved to be out in the middle of the night in the alleys. I loved to be dancing in the street with it didn't matter, with if I vomited on my clothes, I'd just, rub it out a little bit and keep going, and I just thought that was the life. I loved living hard. And then it was in the mid-'70s and in the late '70s, and I was sort of into a punk rock. We did the Whiskey A Go-Go and the Dead Kennedys, and it was very sort of violent and extreme punk rock in those days. You'd get hurt in the dance clubs, really, you would. People would punch you in the face a lot, and it was okay if you were taking Quaaludes, because it was okay, well, this is, I love the extreme. I love anything dangerous, and I loved confronting cops. Do you know what I mean? I love saying, what? Because I was so afraid of them. I was so afraid of everybody, but now I could just say, go ahead and search me, and they were just kind of grossed out by me. But, my best decision making brought me to a place where I hooked up with this guy named Rebel. And I'm telling you, what 19-year-old doesn't want to meet a guy named Rebel? I was okay, I've gone to heaven. And he was a big drug dealer, and I didn't know it then, but he was 10 years older than me and paid my rent and bought me, he didn't pay my rent, I lived with him. And then he had a person he called his godfather, which we now know was his sugar daddy, right? So we had this weird, bizarre dynamic where the godfather was paying for Reb and Reb was paying for me, and I was getting sort of the trickle-down economic benefit of whatever that was. And the godfather was a lawyer who was this tall and had a fedora, I swear, and a monocle, really, always, honestly. And we had stolen money, we had ripped him off, we were scammy, we were doing all the things that alcoholics and drug addicts do. On my 21st birthday, you know how people get like a theme cake? You know, like you get a grocery store cake, and my mom always gets one with a piano on it because she plays the piano. My brother gets golf clubs. Mine was like drugs. Because Tom's a drug addict. Put drugs on the cake, yay! You know, it was like weed and Quaaludes and Coke. It was like, I have pictures. It was so sad when you look back, but that lifestyle was all about lying to people, not having friends, not having real friends, but having people that I ripped off. And I came out of a blackout on, it was like a Tuesday afternoon, and there were people inside the apartment, and we'd black it out. We would make it all dark in there, no matter what time of day. And there were people in there that I was like, did you break in or did I invite you in? I don't really know. I don't really know. And it was like this sort of moment of clarity. And the lawyer godfather said he was going to have us locked up. You know, he was like, there's a warrant out for your arrest and we're going to have you locked up. And we thought, why don't we go to AA? And so he said, AA's too good for you. You have to be locked up. And so he was like chasing us around town. So we went to Rodeo on an October night in 1981. And it was, I remember seeing, in those days, it was very much about fur coats and Rolex watches, and it was very, very fancy. And I didn't feel like I belonged there, but I remember the secretary was wearing like a hat, maybe with a veil, and with like, what I perceived now to be like a ball gown, like a big shoulder and a long thing. Like, they dressed up in 1981. I mean, it was serious to be the secretary of Rodeo. You had to have the costume for it. And I thought, well, I guess it's not that bad. I was like, I'm not going to join up this club because it's too weird. Like, when you get to the fourth step, I thought, I don't want to talk about that stuff. I had a shame list a mile long. I was so many things that I had. If you're here and you're new and you have secrets, you're in the right place. And the thing that we do is we meet somebody that we can trust, and we share privately our secrets. And believe it or not, there's someone here that will share our secrets and listen to us. And it's one of the things around here that is the most freeing things. But I didn't, my first day, kind of get hip to that. I didn't want any part of that. And so I had more drinking to do, and I came back on February 16th, 1982, and I've been sober ever since. And I was, you take that scared, bent-up, fearful child who needed a drink badly, and then added to that was like my life mangled by alcohol and drugs, and then you take away what was working for me, and it was a pretty pathetic creature that came in to you seeking help. And I didn't know about anything. I didn't know about grocery shopping. Like, I shopped at like the Sunbee Liquor on Sunset, and that was like, I'd get like Pop-Tarts, do you know what I mean, at 11:30 at night for groceries. Because the markets were so scary. like the fluorescent lights, and like you can often see your reflection in the window, and I just knew that I looked absurd. I couldn't like, oh my God, like, what are they thinking? And I had like voices that were saying to me, for instance, when I'd be like choosing a toothpaste, having run out, for a few days, I'd be like looking around, and I could swear I would think that people would be saying to me, you idiot, don't buy Crest, you're supposed to buy Colgate. Or something like this. Like, I had these assaultive thoughts in my head. And so I would have to be like, like kind of like checking for people to pass before I chose. I mean, that's how self-centered and neurotic and awful that I was. And this guy, Michael B., had a commitment at a meeting, and in his commitment, he had to bring cheese and crackers on Martel. And so he said, come with me and I'll help you, and you'll help me shop. And I was like, he's like, okay, we'll get the cheese. And I was like, and he just pulled this package of cheese off the thing. And I said, how did you know, like, which cheese to get? And he said, well, they love Monterey Jack in AA. And I was like, well, how did you know that? He goes, just trust me, they love it in AA. And then he sliced it into cubes, and I was like, how did you figure that out? I just was so mesmerized by all the workings of life that didn't involve alcohol and drugs at 4 a.m. Do you know what I mean? And then he made me do a coffee commitment at where 2 + 2 was. On Wednesday night, there was a beginner's meeting. And he had me take over his coffee commitment, and I was petrified because I didn't, those urns are so big. And you really don't know when you come in, like, well, how much water? And how much coffee? And what kind of coffee? And he said, listen, in AA, the official coffee is chock full of nuts. And I was like, oh, really? Like, how did you, okay. So I bought the chock full of nuts, and I made the coffee at this meeting, and I remember very clearly thinking that there was a woman who got some coffee at the meeting and saying, this coffee stinks. And she didn't say it to me. She said it to somebody else, but I could see her in profile. And I remembered that very deeply. I mean, I was newly sober, and I thought, she's not going to get away with this. She will pay for that comment. Because that's how I my only thing was like retribution, getting back, throwing a bomb. I only knew how to react to things like that. I couldn't ever take things, in any other way than a personal affront. And so I went home and I thought, you know what, next week when I see her, I would rehearse things that I was gonna say and the way I was gonna look at her. And she didn't even know that I did the coffee, by the way. So and then I thought, I'm gonna get her so bad, she's not even gonna know why I'm making her feel bad. And that'll really be, really twisted logic about this. And then I thought, I don't even want to go to that meeting. There's plenty of meetings around. I don't want to go to that meeting. She'll be there. And my sponsor said, you have to go. You have a commitment. It's about showing up for your commitment. And you're gonna make her coffee, and you're not gonna say anything to her. And I was like, oh, this AA thing is terrible. I stand up for myself. I was like just seething. But I wanted to show up, and I went to the meeting the next Wednesday. And I waited, and I made the coffee, and people drank the coffee. And she wasn't even there. She didn't even show up to the meeting. And so I had spent a whole week noshing over this resentment that just died right then and there because she wasn't even there. And my sponsor said, Tom, this is your story. Most of your problems will die of neglect. Stop working on your problems. Stop fanning the flame. Start facing that you have a life that could be good. And start making a gratitude list. Look at things differently. And it was the beginning of my changed perception about what could be a life here in AA. And so I made a gratitude list, and it would be stupid. I'm happy to be sober today. And I was some days. Somebody talked about how it changes in your first 90 days. And I remember I lived on Beverly Glen, just about a mile above Sunset. And I remember I had a job folding T-shirts, and I went to a gym, and I just remembered that I went to a meeting, and I had a coffee shop afterwards, and we'd go to the old world after Rodeo. Everybody would go and be so vibrant and be chatting and talking, or we'd go to Junior's after Ohio Street. Whatever night it was, it felt like I had done service that day. I had taken some time to do something at the meeting, and I had participated in my recovery, and I had done something. I'd shown up for work, and people used to say, give them a dime for their nickel at work, work hard, show up early, and everything that I learned about how to operate in the outside world was what I learned here. And you'll see what happens is these meetings sort of start on time a lot of the time, and a lot of times they're really orderly, and a lot of times I show up and I listen, or I participate just like I said I was going to do, and I learned to bring that out into the real world, into my life, into my job, into my interactions with people that I didn't like the people who worked for the phone company who were turning off my phone for not paying my bill. And so I remember coming home one night. It was 90 days sober. It took 90 days sober for this to happen. But I was driving my Mustang II, which was cracked up. I got in a terrible accident, and I never fixed it because I spent the insurance money on a run. And what that meant was the window could never actually go up or down. It was sort of halfway stuck there. And there was a breeze. There was just like a cool breeze coming up the canyon. And I just thought, God, that feels good. And I just was like, it was as simple as that. It was something in the moment made me feel like, wait, maybe that's what they're talking about when they're saying this thing about serenity. Like, I really feel serene in this one moment. And that one moment made me feel like it was somehow connected to infinity. And it made me feel like, I get it. If I do the footwork, if I show up, there will be some peace of mind. There will be some sense of ease and comfort that they talk about, that the old timers talk about, that the book talks about, that people talk about in rooms. And I really, it's just that moment was so important to me because I was a spazzy, scared kid who didn't have any of that. And when I was coming up to a year sobriety, I started having a life. I started having sort of like a fuller life where I started going to the gym and I was eating right, and I remember I was still trying to work some things out, like I was going to the laundromat over on Santa Monica and Westgate, and I was too scared to fold the laundry in front of people because I would think that you'd see like the yellow stains in my white t-shirts or something, you know, like the armpits. And if I saw something like that, and then I saw somebody around, I'd be like, oh my God, I can't believe that shirt's in there. I can't even, how'd that end up in there? Throw it away. And like I looked at my life as with this hyper scrutiny that I thought other people were looking at who were doing their laundry. So I remember this particular day when I was 11 months sober, and I just took all the clothes and I just threw them in the back of the trunk and unfolded, right? And then I grabbed them all to come back home, and I had like whatever I had else. I had something else. It was a gym bag or a grocery set. I mean, it's doing like my life. I was having like a life. I didn't have a life before. I was having a life. And I got up to the doorstep, and I was trying to fish out my key to get it into the door, and like the worst possible thing that could happen did happen, which was that one sock, you know, like fell off the top of the laundry pile down to the floor. And I was like, that's it, God. Look what I've done. I've been trying all this time. I've gone to meetings, I've shown up, and look what you've done. And I just had like a hissy fit and I had like, I think I had like these major panic attacks where I actually had to drop everything on the front porch, and I went out to the backyard and I had to take off all my clothes and scream. And it's the best thing I could think of to do at the time. It seemed to work. And then someone called and I said, God, I can't believe this. I can't believe it. What happened? I said, the sock dropped and I can't even try my best. And I'm screaming outside, and he said, you know, you probably should see a psychiatrist. And then I was like, okay. I was like, that's probably correct. And then I picked up the phone and I called my sponsor, and my sponsor laughed and said, go to a meeting. And then I went to a meeting. And then that was the last time I had a panic attack like that. And I had a series of panic attacks my first year where I'd rush myself to UCLA and say, it's happening now. It's happening now. And they were like, it's not happening. Go home. So, and it's these things that like the things that I'm the most fearful about, like going to the market, are the things that I love the most about me and my life now. Like now, I'm all about like, I know everybody at Gelson's. I'm like, hi Manny, hi Sue. You know, like, can we cut those navel oranges? I'd love to taste them, see if I, you know, like I'm really in there in the market. Like it's my favorite like social occasion. And like after any meetings that I go to meetings in Silver Lake. If you go to meetings in Silver Lake and then you go to the Trader Joe's afterwards, you're gonna have like another meeting after the meeting because everybody from AA is there. And you're like, hey, wasn't that great tonight? You know, like you just kinda, I hang out with the shopping cart now in a place that I was devastated about before. And so I mean, the thing for me in AA is that it taught me how to step forward in my life and show up to a life that I was too afraid of having. And my sponsor made me do these things called bookending, where I would say, call me and do this thing, and then, do the thing, and then call me and tell me you did it. It's this amazing guy. You remember him, Keith. His name was Art, and he believed in me more than I believed in myself, and he had like a file on me. He would be like, "Oh, Tom," and he'd be like pulling up, "Oh, Tom, you're on the 6th step, okay," and I would be like, "Oh my God, a person has a file on me." Like he wasted 39 cents of his own money to have, I couldn't believe it, and he had this gigantic bust of himself in the foyer of his house, and I was like, wow, that should be in a museum. It's fantastic. Where did you get that? That's amazing. And he said, I made it, and I was like, God, I mean, I want to have that kind of healthy ego. Do you know? I want to really think that well of myself. And there was like a Time magazine, and it said, Art, Man of the Year. And I now know that like he got it at like a carnival or something like that. But honestly, I was like, my sponsor is the best sponsor in the world. And he made me go to school. I was a person that graduated a year early and forged a teacher's note to get out of Pacifica High School. And he made me go to school. He made me get an application to law school. I took the bar and passed the bar, all because of this guy who made me do it one step at a time and became a lawyer, And so now I'm a person who wakes up in the morning and says, Dear God, please show me how I can be of service. And inevitably, there's a ton of ways I can be of service today. There's a ton of ways anybody can be of service, no matter what our job is or whether we have a job or not. But I really strongly believe that, lots of people are lawyers who are alcoholics. For me, my going to law school and becoming a lawyer is an AA success story. There's no way I could have done it without having been here and having been led by you one step at a time, every step of the way to do that. And, I'm 28 years sober. I've known Lauren so many of these years, and we've gone through so many things. People have died, kids have been born, not my kids, but like you see life happening, you see people coming in. My father, who I thought hated me for being gay, I got married to a man whom I love, and my father loves him, and my mom loves him too, and so we're all hanging out tomorrow. Like things that, if you had told me that would happen in my sobriety, the first time I came in here, I'd be like, no, that sounds creepy. But it's like these things that I could never have imagined or planned for or wanted or dreamed of wanting really happen, and it's life happens. And this year, I want to say, I went back to basics. I was having a hard time. I want to tell you, old timers, if you're old and you're having a hard time, it happens too. And I was having a hard time, and I did 90 and 90 because somebody said that's what works, And 90 and 90 means going to 90 meetings in 90 days, and I did it. And I made 3 outreach calls a day, and my sponsor had me doing a gratitude list again, making 10 things I'm grateful for and sending it to him on email. I started making my sponsees do it. Now I get those in the email and I send it off. And it changed my whole perspective again. It changed my whole feeling about being down in the dumps and feeling like, why isn't life working? What's going on? We go through dark corridors. We have dark passages. And then the thing that I love about AA the most is it takes us right where we are. Wherever we are, it helps us. And so all we have to do is put a hand out to somebody who needs it and be open to listening to advice when we ask for it. And show up and suit up, and if you're new, stick around. It's the most amazing place you could ever hope to be. It works for me, and I know it can work for you. Thank you very much. Keep coming back.
Okay, this is how I prepare my drone for launching. I like to do it inside the cab of my truck so I'm not standing outside in the weather. to install the joysticks for control. Up and down, right and left. Powered on. I have an Android phone that I use to connect it to the drone with. And it's actually controlled through the iPhone, through an app. Oops, wrong way. It's actually controlled through the iPhone, or through this Android phone, through the app. It's actually controlled through the Android phone, through an app, and you connect it through this short connection right here.
Remote control connected.
Remote control's connected. So I pull out the drone. I have to extend the legs. Long legs extended first, then the short legs. Remove the gimbal protector. Set that aside, then power it on one short burst, then one long burst. I lay it down. So I have to go to calibrate. So the drone's not connected yet. It shows you here as this drone gets disconnected, even though the remote's powered on. So the drone has to establish it's connected. So I go into the app to calibration mode. First I'll calibrate the remote controller. Start calibration. Out, in, out, in, up, down, and then this little wheel is to control the gimbal. So it's calibrated. Go to gimbal calibration, start calibration, and then it calibrates the gimbal. If that shows up, the gimbal's moving all over the place. Changes, you can see it on the video. And I'm calibrated to take off. It's acquired 7 satellites at the moment. There are 26 satellites up in the sky, which it has to acquire before you can take off. So it's connected. It's got enough satellites. This is white. I can go to press this little arrow button, swipe right to take off, and it would start the motors if I slid this to the right. But I'll wait till I get outside. Don't want to do it inside.